Leaders Talk, the interview podcast portraying leaders who are committed to better leadership, better organizations, and a better world. Powered by Leadership Choices.
A warm welcome to Leaders Talk, the interview podcast for better leadership, better organizations, and a better world. My name is Karsten Drath, and I'm one of the managing partners of Leadership Choices. My guest today is Abiola Sarnecki. Abiola is a person that has my highest respect. She was born and raised in Nigeria, did her education partially in the UK and in Nigeria, moved over to Germany, had a career in management consulting, and then restarted her career in academia, made her PhD, and finally became a professor for leadership development and organizational behavior. Abiola is a trailblazer. She has been in many positions where she was the first of her kind, and it is very inspiring to listen to her. So let's go right into the conversation with Abiola, who will take us on a journey through her exciting life so far. And I'm sure there's more stories to be told going forward. So let's go right into the podcast with Professor Dr. Abiola Sarnecki. Welcome, Professor Dr. Abiola Sarnecki. Welcome to Leaders Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I'm very, very glad that I can call you Abiola.
Yes, you can.
Abiola, we just found out we go back like 24 years. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
I've been following your development throughout life, your career a little bit. Our paths have crossed several times in life. What do you do today? Why don't you, what do you do? Who are you and what do you do? Maybe let's start with a simple question.
Yeah, you call that simple. I call that difficult. Let's see. Well, who am I? Well, I'm multiple things, multiple identities. So let me start with, I am a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, a sister, a cousin, an aunt, a friend. 1. Number 2, I am a professor, I am a teacher, I am a coach, I am a mentor. Number 3, I am multicultural in every sense of the word. I am very curious. I'm always asking questions. And I love music. Yes.
Okay, that's a new thing. Okay, good. Okay, we'll talk about that as well. Excellent. And so you are a professor for what and where do you teach? How do you work?
I'm a professor for organizational behavior and human resource management, and I work at the Hochschule Rhein-Main, which is the Rhein-Main-University of Applied Sciences, and there I am in the department, the Wiesbaden Business School.
Okay. And the interesting thing is, not only is this interesting in itself, but the interesting thing is you started your professional career with studying electrical engineering.
Yes, I did.
Why don't you walk us through how did you get from electrical engineering to being a professor what was it?
Organizational behavior and human resource management. It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is a mouthful, yes. So how did you get there?
Okay, it was actually a very long journey with many winding roads, but I'll do my best to make it short. So, first of all, I started studying, and I studied engineering, electrical engineering at the University of Lagos in Nigeria. So that was my bachelor. And interestingly enough, my dad was also in the faculty at the time. Maybe that was the influence that I knew many with his colleagues, my uncles. I knew many engineers and I liked mathematics. So I just figured I'm going to do engineering, right? So I guess my dad was very, very, was a very big influence there because, of course, I wanted to be like my dad. Yes. And then I went on to do my master's in digital electronics at King's College London. Thereafter, I worked as an engineer in England for a couple of years in engineering consulting. And then I realized that, wait a minute, are you really enjoying this? And the answer after much soul searching was, I'm not sure. And so I thought to myself, okay, why don't I try to diversify what I know? One day, maybe I would like to run my own company, or even if it's an engineering company, maybe one day I would like to just do something different. Why not broaden your horizon? So I decided to do an MBA. And this was at Imperial College in London. And I remember talking to my dad about it, and he was like, oh, so you don't want to stay in engineering? And I'm like, well, I don't quite know yet. And to be fair, he was like, okay, whatever it is you want to do, I'm behind you. And so I decided to do an MBA in Imperial College. That was when I realized that my favorite subject was organizational behavior. And I really had an interest in this soft part of leadership, this soft part of management, this psychological part of management. And I realized also that my mathematical background helped me with a lot of the logical thinking, and a lot of actually deciphering the analysis in that area. But I didn't quite get to that far yet. I then decided that, okay, maybe I want to go into management. So I hadn't really thought too much about what kind. I just thought, okay, I want to go into management. And so after my MBA, I started working for Accenture. At the time, it was Anderson Consulting in Nigeria. Now, there, I started off in what we call business re-engineering, so process. So it was more like the harder line of management, looking at the processes. I enjoyed that, especially being with the different clients. And then something that I hadn't mentioned before, during my master's in digital electronics in London at King's College, I met my future husband. And after much here and there, and can I live anywhere else but Nigeria? I'm not so sure. This is a huge decision. I went back to Nigeria at that time to work for Accenture, as I said. And then after thinking about it a lot, Michael, that's my husband now, came to Nigeria as well. Then we decided, okay, let's do this. Big decision. But then, yes, and I remember at the time there was some bad press about Germany as well. In Rostock, I think. I can't remember exactly. So many of my cousins and friends were like, are you sure you want to go to Germany? But then I decided, yeah, okay, let's do this. So I came to Germany in 1996. My company, Accenture in Nigeria, actually, I spoke to my boss, the managing partner at the time, and explained to him what I would like to do. I would like to move, but would it be possible to remain with the company? And he said, yeah, let's see what I can do. And he then spoke to his counterparts in the German office. And since I was already with the company, the only thing I needed to do was learn German, which they said would be a prerequisite. And so I got married. I came to Germany first. We got married a couple of months later because I wanted to see what it was like. I think luckily I was in Frankfurt because Frankfurt is pretty international. I like Frankfurt. Even though it's not the prettiest city in Germany, I found Frankfurt very welcoming. And so I felt good, I was comfortable, and started learning German in the Goethe Institute. And there, I also met quite a number of people who were like me in the sense that they were professionals working in Germany or starting to work here and trying to learn the language. So that foundation, the intensive German courses I did at the Goethe Institute helped. And so 6 months after I came, we did a German test. I remember my German test at Accenture, and then I started working there in Germany. in the Frankfurt office at the time. They were in Sulzbach. And I was there for 8 years. So I grew at Accenture. I learned a lot. And that was where I discovered actually that I think I ended up in the change management section at the time. And that was kind of like, hey, something's happened here that I would maybe not have taken the step to do, but it's me. It's actually me. I like this area of management. I like this softer aspect of management. I learned a lot at Accenture. And then after some years, I moved on to work for an IT company in Darmstadt, Twinsoft, where I worked part-time because during this time, I had children. To Accenture's credit again, and I'll come back to that, but they gave me this chance again. I was actually promoted to manager while I was on maternity leave, which was something that I felt was a huge trust in me again. However, trying to balance work life, I had children, different priorities. I decided to move in another direction. So I went to work in this software company part-time at the time, and I was working in HR, looking after the SAP consultants, the freelancers. But then after a while, I realized that was not actually there was this itch. There was something that I wanted to do. I couldn't quite phrase what it was, but I knew that I was restless, right? I couldn't articulate what exactly it was that was making me a bit restless. And then I'd known him for a while. He was a professor at EBS at the time, and we got talking. And I told him, Ansgar Richter, I'm interested in, I don't know what I want to do. He asked me, what would you like? And I said, I actually like research. I've been thinking for a while about doing my PhD, but I'm not quite sure because I've had so much work experience. I don't know whether I would fit. And he said, in what area? And I said, well, actually in organizational behavior. For me, I've always been fascinated with the softer side of management. I've always been fascinated with more the way people, their attitudes, the way they behave, and why they behave the way they do, why they think the way they do. And he's like, okay, you know what? Since you're not quite sure, why don't you come to one of our writing workshops, our research workshops, and see, afterwards, let's talk. And so I did that. And I realized that I actually did enjoy this discussion, this research discussion and the research perspective. And so I said to him, I would like to do this. So I had to do a couple of tests, a couple of interviews. I had to talk to, of course, the professors that were in charge of that area. And hey, they gave me that chance. They must have seen something in me because they were like, okay, yeah, you know what? We know that you are not the typical PhD student, but we believe that you can do this. And so I started in 2012. I left my job because I realized this is what I want to do. And having a job, a household, small children, and a PhD, I knew I was just realistic. And I knew all that was just, I wouldn't be able to do that. Maybe some people could, but I couldn't. I decided that there was one that had to go. And so I left my job, right? And I didn't actually regret it because I knew that was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my academic professional life. And so I went on. At the beginning, it was tough because coming from not having been to school for God knows how many years, 15 years, and then working for that is a completely different way of speaking, a completely different language. I remember reading my first academic paper and I thought my native language was English, but it took a while, but I got there. And just through sheer hard work, I finished my PhD and I got my doctorate in 2017. And during this time, actually before I even started the PhD, I knew that I wanted to go into academia. I'm assuming that it was my parents' influence. And growing up in Nigeria, we have the British system. So we lived on campus. My parents are both professors. We lived on campus, so they were both. And therefore, that was for me a very trusted atmosphere. I knew it kind of. And I kind of knew that I realized at that time, during this whole sense making and soul searching, you want to do academia, you want to go into academia, you want to teach, you want to do research. And so I decided, even when I was talking to EBS, that's what I want to do. I want to remain here. I don't want to go back into industry. I want to stay here. And so after my PhD, EBS was like, why don't you stay on as a postdoc? Which I did. And then in August 2021, there was time for another change. And then I decided to I got the job at Rhein-Main, Hochschule Rhein-Main, and that's when I started there as professor.
That's amazing. And it's an amazing story. And in many instances, you were a trailblazer in the sense of being the first of your kind, right? In a position, I think you were Accenture being a very international company, but at EBS, you were the only, person of color / black person in the faculty. How was that to be unique, different?
Yeah, at EBS, it was quite interesting because EBS, again, just like Accenture, is very international. And so in terms of the doctoral students, which I was when I started, I was the only Black PhD student, if I remember correctly, and the only African. But there were many different nationalities as well. So I didn't feel very unique in that sense. In terms of when I started working then as a lecturer there and postdoc, yes, I was more unique in that sense because although we also had faculty with Indian origin, and then we started, we had a PhD student from Turkey, I think also Iran, one from Turkey, one from Iran, and then German PhD students from different ethnic backgrounds. So it wasn't really that unique at EBS, and I never really felt so, especially also because the students were very diverse. And we also had at EBS also faculty from Asia, from Singapore, and so we also had faculty from Mauritius. So it was quite diverse, including the students. What, however, I found unique was this role that developed for me, especially with students and with other faculty from different backgrounds, in that I then found myself in this role as being the person, their mentor, their go-to person, because they felt, you would understand. So living in a country that you didn't grow up in, having to learn the language, coming from a completely different background, and also looking, I would argue that there are many Black Germans now. So, there was this, I found myself in this role where I was then giving advice. When you come here, this is what you should do in order to prepare yourself to get a job. How would you fit? How would you settle down for students who just came? So finding myself in that role. And then within the university, I was then appointed as the diversity officer. And there I found that, again, this role enabled me to look a little deeper than just the diversity, but also the inclusion. Mm-hmm. So how do the processes then make people feel included, feel comfortable? And I realized that it's not just this in what we call intersectionality, that I'm female and that I'm Black, but also I felt that there were other things that we don't talk enough about. So in terms of age, in terms of disabilities, in terms of sexual orientation, in terms of religion, we don't talk too much about those. We tend to focus a lot on gender, in terms of, I guess maybe because it's the easiest to talk about, right? And the others are much more, can be very, very sensitive topics. The problem there, however, is that many things then don't get spoken about and don't get dealt with. And that was, I was very grateful for this position because it allowed me to also articulate and also communicate some of these things. And to be fair, I mean, EBS was very open to a lot of these, a lot of the changes and suggestions that we made.
And Abiola, what I observe when working with you, we teach a class together on leadership development, is that there's a certain driver inside of you, a certain set of strong values that you're kind of living by. And I wonder, how is that related to your family situation when you grow up? Can you maybe take us there? Like, what was the family situation like? So you're living on campus, you have 3 siblings, you being the oldest one. How was it to grow up in such a space? What did you take away? What did you take with you?
Yeah, I must say that I must admit I had a very privileged childhood. Why? Because living on campus, it was like living in a little bubble. Yeah, I could jump on my bike and just go to my friend's house. We walked to school, right? So it was this whole life within the campus. There was a mini mart, there was a cinema, everything was there. There was a sports ground, everything was there. So I must say that was where I find myself very lucky to have lived in this safe space as a child. And I was there till we lived on campus from when I was in primary school till my first year in university, right? What was it that shaped me? I remember my parents talking, and my mom was just about to be made, or she was applying to be made a professor. She was trying to get her professorship. And I remember the gender issues at the time and the discussions with my dad and with colleagues about why she was meeting some, there were obstacles that just because she was a woman, don't forget this was a different generation. And she was one of the few women with the potential to become professor at the time in medicine. I remember those conversations. I remember being very impressed. My dad was always behind her 100%, right? And they would talk. And I remember my sisters and I were listening. My brother was too young at the time. I think he wasn't even born. I don't remember. But it was things like her talking about conversations that she'd had where she wasn't being taken seriously because she was a woman, where she was passed over for promotion sometimes because she was female, even though she had more credentials. And my dad telling her, yes, I understand. I know that what it's like to having to work twice as hard. You can do it. How can I help you? And I remember those conversations imprinted in my mind, right? She got that professorship. She got it, right? Through sheer hard work and just going for it. And she did it without us feeling any way abandoned. We were there. She worked hard, but when she was with us, right? So that really, really shaped me. Also what shaped me being there in the university, in the 70s, the Students' Union was very strong in Nigeria, very strong. And there were loads of demonstrations. I remember us having to stay home once because there were student demonstrations and the police came, and it was really quite violent because they actually did kill a student. And I remember that remaining in my mind for a long time, this right to demonstrate, the right to voice your opinion without having to Again, being peaceful about it, but without having to deal with people trying to stop you from using your voice. I remember that very, very well because we're right in the middle of it. Those were the two big events that shaped me from living on campus. I must say, those two things. Yeah, if I think of anything else, I'll tell you. But those are the two things I remember very well.
And maybe you can also shed some light on Nigeria as a country or as a society, because I realized the first time I got to Africa was 2010, and I was suddenly realizing the amount of biases combined with lacking information that I had about Africa. I was in a class where I thought of myself as being very good qualified, and I was the least qualified in this class. And everybody was around me was Black from different African countries. And I was so impressed. And I just said, oh my gosh, you just have no idea. That was a white spot on my map, on my mental map of the world.
Yes.
Nigeria is one of the biggest national economies on the planet on the continent of Africa, together with South Africa. If not the first one.
If not the first.
It's built around oil and gas. There is a solid middle class. I think you being an example of that. How is it? How is the country? How is it to grow up there? I mean, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah. I mean, let me come back. In terms of the middle class, unfortunately, Nigeria is very unequal in terms of there are a few very rich people and many poor. And in between, there isn't that much, right? And this inequality is one of the problems that is facing, and Nigeria is dealing with day in, day out. However, Nigeria is also a mine of knowledge, of great minds, of creativity, of innovation. Growing up, I think your question was growing up and living in Nigeria, right? What frustrates me sometimes is the lack of information about many African countries in, I would just say, the West. Even when we are in management school, we almost never have examples of African companies. We almost never have examples of African leaders. And that really sometimes really upsets me. I introduce them in my classes. I always do. I make it a point. Why? Because that continent is so full of promise that is not even being recognized. When we look at Nigeria today, and I look at the ideas that come, we're talking about a population of 130, might be more, million people in one country. 100 different languages, not dialects. The dialects come on top. Richness of culture. There are 50, I think it's like 50% Muslim, 48% Christian, something like that, and 2% everything else. So it's actually also very challenging in terms of religion. And that's why, of course, there tends to be quite a lot of friction there because the north is mostly Islam, the south is mostly Christian, although it's kind of mixed in the south. But there is a lot of friction, and all we hear about over here in the news is about terrorism, is about people being attacked, people being kidnapped, which is not a lie. But there is no balance in the reporting as to what is good.
Right.
Whenever I go to Nigeria and I see what people are doing, you know that when it comes to event management, let's just talk about event management now. People who set up their entrepreneurs, I don't think I've met as many entrepreneurs anywhere than in Nigeria. People who set up, men and women alike, right? And there is the women are strong. Women are strong. They get up there and they do what they need to do. I mean, when I think about people who set up things like a catering business, and the catering business is making millions a year. When I think about people who set up fashion designers, some of them actually appear in fashion shows in New York or in Paris. We're talking about real creative people here. We're talking about startups that have expanded outside Nigeria into the African continent. And actually, you then see more and more Nigerian companies actually setting up subsidiaries in the UK, for example. But nobody ever talks about these people. Nobody ever talks about these companies, right? And it's kind of quite frustrating. Nigeria has is also, and then this whole idea that if I talk about one country, I talk about the continent, is something that I've always tried to, it's like somebody asks me, okay, so what's Kenya like? And then I ask them, okay, so what's Greece like? I mean, for me, it's the same thing, even further away than Greece is from Germany. It's completely different language, completely different culture. So that misunderstanding, and this huge continent is somehow homogeneous, I find quite, it's not true, basically, right? Also, you find some of the greatest minds. I find it sometimes a pity that quite a number of them are not living there. If you look in NASA or MIT, the greatest universities or the greatest research companies or wherever, you will find at least one Nigerian there. At least. I bet you. Right? And it's a pity they're not at home doing this. But then, of course, economic circumstances. Yeah, which is a different topic altogether in terms of where Nigeria is economically and how to build the know-how that the people have. However, I would say that every time I go there, I'm always very impressed by the creativity, by the resilience against all odds of people succeeding. People who manufacture handbags even though electricity is not constant. And still manage to get on the internet to sell these things. The amount of resilience in that country is unbelievable.
That's amazing. And Abiola, that gives a bit of an idea, I think, on the strength that also comes from your family background and also from maybe the people or the plural, the different people in Nigeria. I have 4 kids, and if I would ask any of them to move to a different country and study there, they would go like, no, why should I? So where did you take this hunger or this energy to decide to go to the UK, for example? What was driving you, and what made you overcome concerns, fears, if there were any?
To go to the UK was not really a problem as such because of this there's a very close relationship between the UK, or rather between England and Nigeria, and that is from the past, right? Nigeria was one of the British colonies, and in 1960, Nigeria got its independence. However, Nigeria has 4 official languages, and English is one of them. The school system is basically the English system, the British system, or rather the British system. And so it wasn't that much of a big leap for me and for many to go to the UK to study. So I must be fair, because the UK is somewhere where Nigerians go often. So I've been going to the UK on holiday to London or wherever since I was really tiny. So I knew it. It wasn't new for me. So to that regard, I would say that it wasn't a very difficult decision to make.
Okay. And then growing up in Nigeria, the mainstream population is Black.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you are a minority, you are white or
Yeah.
something else, right?
Yeah.
Coming to the UK, there was a first change, but there was certainly a big change coming to Frankfurt, coming to
Yes.
Germany.
Yes.
So, I mean, can you take us on a journey? How did you deal with this?
Right. When I went to the UK, I didn't really feel, again, because there's such a big Nigerian community there, and I was in London. London is very international. But the one thing I did notice, and that's what I always tell my students as well, when you leave your own culture, I always find this analogy of a fish in a goldfish bowl or in the ocean that is swimming in water and doesn't actually know what water is until it is taken out. And then realizes, oh, there was something, right? And when I was in London studying, suddenly people, of course, started to ask, so what's your country like? What's Nigeria like? A question that I never posed to myself before I left, right? How do the systems work? Why do they work that way? Those were things that I never thought about before I left, right? And so that forced me to have a second look at my own country and my own culture, and also ask questions of things that I had assumed in the past. So that was something that I learned when I was in London. Coming to Frankfurt, that was then a different thing. Suddenly I found, I did a very new experience, being the only Black person in the room. It felt very, very strange, right? Not that it was any negative impression like that. It was just strange. Mm-hmm. It was just strange. I just noticed, oh gosh, you're the exotic one, right? Again, being in Frankfurt, I think also helped in the sense that every time people saw me, they always wanted to speak English with me. And my husband was like, she's trying to learn German. Please, can you speak German with her? Yeah, and I must say that in terms of my uniqueness, then it became more intense, these questions as to what it's like to be Nigerian, what's Nigeria like, this curiosity. And that's where I also learned that, it's okay for people to ask, because then I can help people learn about this. And so I started to trying to decipher that, or basically it happened automatically, deciphering people who ask out of curiosity's sake and people who don't, right? So that was something that I never had to deal with before. Also, I remember that growing up in a country that's majority Black, I never encountered any form of discrimination or racism growing up. It was something that we just didn't talk about because it didn't exist for us. We were at home. And it only took me a while. I'll be honest, I must say that I have not experienced, and I hope it remains that way, any personal overt racist attack on me or my family in the 25 odd years I've been here. And that is something that I must say till today. However, microaggressions, right? Little things that you can't quite put your foot on, but you realize afterwards, why did that person single me out? Yeah. I remember coming to Germany to visit my then boyfriend for the first time, and them singling me out after getting out of the plane. I was the only Black person there, and really scrutinizing my passport to the extent that there was once I was tired and I was not smiling, or I don't know what was on my face. And for some reason, they put me in a car, put me in another room, tried to interrogate me, and for no reason. And I remember that happening 3-4 times every time I came to Germany. And I realized after a while, you can't keep quiet. And so I then started to question. So why me? Why aren't you asking that person? And then suddenly, oh, no, we didn't mean it that way, right? I must say, though, that in these 25 years, with time, today is very different from then. In Germany, Germany is also going through a lot of development in the areas of inclusion and diversity. It's going through a huge learning process. And there will be people who don't want it. But that learning process is there, and it is moving forward. The Germany of today is very different from the Germany I came to 25 years ago. Also in terms of the way people speak, in terms of the terminology that they use, in terms of the sensitivity. And that is something that more than ever I experience more than overt racism. So I experience more this insensitivity, using terminology that makes me just shrink.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how it is, you mentioned that you were the diversity officer at EBS. I wonder how it is to be addressed as you as a person of color, you as a Black person. If I put myself in those shoes, I would say, but I'm not any person. I'm not defined by my color. I'm Abiola. I'm Karsten. I want to be addressed as a human being, as an individual, not as a part of a group. Is that playing any role for you?
Yes. Yes, it does, because I am Black, and I am proud that I am Black, and I wear it with pride. I am who I am, right? At the same time, I am also a professional, and I know what I'm doing, and I have the skills. And so at work, I expect people, regardless of whether I'm Black, blue, yellow, or green, they should look at my experience and they should look at my skills, just like they would do anybody else.
And Abiola, I think there was, this first education, engineering, and then MBA, then the part in management consulting, and then the academic part of your career. Let's look at the management consulting part, where our paths have crossed for the first time at Anderson Consulting 24 years back. What did you learn about leadership, about organization behavior, about the good, the bad, and the ugly of it? That is, I think, something that makes you also unique, that you are not only an academic that has done a lot of research and studying, but you've also actually worked in the practice and have been leading people, which sometimes I miss with academics, I have to say. So what did you learn there? Where you say this is really key? I've taken this on board as this needs to be improved with future leaders, or this needs to be crucial in their education.
Yeah, I think that what it is for me, developing other people. That is for me being able to decide this is something that I should do, even if it's not the status quo, because I believe that it is right. Also giving other people a chance. I would not be where I am today without leaders who did not give me a chance. I'm very much, it's something that I've learned with time. I remember when I was working at Accenture, I'm sure you remember this too. You'd go to clients, and especially because we were in the change management field, we were not seen as that important. The strategy was important. The technology was important. Oh, you guys, yeah. We'll deal with that part when we get to it.
Chicks
right?
making slides. That was
That was the title. And then they came to the implementation, and suddenly they didn't want to hear from us anymore. And then, of course, a lot of the time it failed because they couldn't carry their people along. And that is something that I just feel many leaders need to really, really recognize, that without their people, their best strategies would not work. Without carrying their people along, nothing. We can have the best strategy in the world. You can have the best technology. But without convincing your people, it's not going to work. So the recognition of how important the people are who work for them. That's number one. Number two, developing others. It's one thing to be a leader and say, I see leadership as mentorship, as a coach. I see that as the role. And integrity plays a very large part in this as well. Being fair. My research area is justice. Being fair to people who work with and for you. I'll give you the examples of my life. So when the first one was when I think I mentioned it, when I came to Germany. My managing partner at Accenture in Nigeria took that chance on me and said, okay, I haven't done this before, but I believe that there's something here. So I'm going to step in for her and I'm going to do this and take my time to help and develop this person. My second pivot came when I came to, and not just my managing partner in Nigeria, but also the managing partner in Germany for taking that chance without even knowing me, right? And then when I decided to move from consulting to academia, that the head of department of the organizational strategy and leadership department at the time, Professor Ansgar Richter, that he actually believed in me and gave me that opportunity to say, yeah, this is not something we usually do, but I believe that this person can do it. So I will take that chance on this person. So leaders, if there are people that have potential, give them the chance, even if they don't fit the status quo. They just might surprise you. Yeah, so I see that I take it very seriously, this developing others.
And that requires that you are capable of looking beyond your own interest, your own self-interest, right?
Yes. Looking beyond your own self-interest and looking to really see how you can make people the best that they can be. And aspiring leaders, many of us tend to, the people who are trying to grow, think of themselves, how can I grow? But sometimes you also grow by helping others do the same.
And one observation, Abiola, that I made when coming to EBS and teaching with you is, I just came to the car park and saw all these Land Rovers and, like not typical student cars. And I was like, this is just a bunch of spoiled kids. And, how do you teach them leadership? How do you teach them humility? What's your experience, even if they may look like, coming from being a wealthy offspring or something, which is a stereotype, I know. But what's your experience when you work with them, when you kind of get closer to them, when you win their trust?
They're just like everybody else. They happen to have parents. Some of them happen to have parents who are well off. But once you get there, I think that there's one thing that students always appreciate, and that is they actually don't mind you being strict as long as you're fair and as long as you explain your reasoning. Yeah. And then you will find out that many actually then, okay, Yeah, I wouldn't say 100% of all, and I wouldn't say it is unique to EPS, right? But you do find out that you have a certain, I would call it authority, if people see that you're authentic and at the same time that you are fair. I really use that word a lot because I find that is extremely important.
And there's also this guiding role that you have since they're still fairly young. And there's also this guidance that this is the boundary conditions. That is where you want to stay on.
That is where you stay and you don't cross that line. And I always do it in my first class. These are the boundary conditions. These are the rules for this class. Yeah. And I always make it very clear. Nobody else's opinion is rubbish. Right? We are in class and everybody deserves to be listened to. And especially because at EBS, there's always very international classes with people from different cultures. As a professor, as a lecturer, as a teacher, you have to be very sensitive to what those cultural differences are. There are some cultures where people don't talk. And there are some where you have to slow them down, right? And so you have to be very aware about the dynamics in the classroom and making sure that it is an open space for people to speak and at the same time being respectful to each other. And if you can do that in that classroom space, I believe very strongly they will continue to behave like that towards each other, even outside the classroom.
Yeah, makes sense. And Abiola, I just want one more topic I want to discuss with you. And this is, how do you actually turn a place that is not diverse, not inclusive, has not enough representation into a place that has that, right? And I don't want to discuss this as abstractly. Let's talk about our company, Leadership Choices. We don't have a single Black coach right now. We have international people. We have 60% women, so it's not the gender topic. We have female representation in the management team, but we find it hard to attract and retain people that are not part of the either living in Germany or kind of are very, very different. And I think for me that represents also what larger companies are kind of going through, not finding the talent, not keeping them. So how would you approach such a situation where you want to get more diverse, where you want to make it a place where people want to be no matter where they come from? What could leaders do in order to strengthen that?
First of all, where are you looking? What are the criteria that you're using to select? Are they maybe too restrictive and you're doing this subconsciously? So I'm assuming that you need to be certified as a coach. But who are the people taking these certifications? Is that international enough? Are there other qualifications that would make somebody a coach, but maybe not exactly the same exact exam or schooling or certification that you are looking for? Maybe there are others, because I do know Black coaches. I know several, but it's possible that they are somewhere else. Maybe they're in the US, maybe they're in Nigeria, and they're not certified according to what you recognize as certification. So that might be one thing. So in short, where are you looking? In what markets? Number one. And number two, are your selection criteria in any way a little bit too restrictive? Is there something that you could make a bit softer and then maybe train within on the job? So those are things that you might want to think of. The second thing that I always say is that there is one thing is to get people in, another one is to keep them. And so it's all fine when we talk about diversity. And we talk a lot about increasing numbers and becoming more diverse. But I'm not sure we talk enough about inclusion and making people feel that they have a voice and that they belong. And that sometimes this happens without us even knowing it. So our processes, are they all in a language everybody understands? Can somebody who doesn't speak German come into your organization and look through the policies and look through the rules and understand what's going on? Are official documents in different languages? Are they inclusive? When you, I'm also speaking for companies as well. So an inclusive organization should make the possibility, if you're going to hire someone and you say you want to be international and you hire people who don't speak, when you say German is not a must, and you hire people on that basis, then you have to be sure that they are included in every single thing that you do. And language is the easiest. But also when it comes to all kinds of processes. So something else is, do you have exams on Yom Kippur? If a Jewish student says, but that is the day, then why should you have an exam on that day? Right? Those are things that we don't necessarily take into consideration, but it is true. What is visible, I mean, we do see increasing buildings, and sometimes I think it's also by law, sometimes that you have to make sure that you have access for people with disabilities. But there are also disabilities that you cannot see with your naked eye. How is that talked about? How is that seen to? How is that dealt with? So when we talk about diversity, we talk about all kinds of things in terms of being an inclusive organization, whether it's a university, whether it's a company, whatever. And it is not it's not easy, but it's something that needs to be done if we want to have a diverse and inclusive organization.
Absolutely. And I like that the way you lay that out. It's like it's processes, it's procedures, it's documents, but it's culture, it's communication, it's language, jargon, practices, rituals. It cuts across the entire organization. Right?
So you can say the broad definition of an organizational culture, everything from the visible part to the ones under the surface. Right. They have to be really inclusive, and that people have to be able to talk about differences without being offensive. Mm-hmm. And it always comes from the top. It always comes from the top, right? That if the top management says this is a priority, we are an inclusive organization and this is the way we're going to do things, then typically, and then of course, the kind of people you hire, we don't, when people are hiring and there's an interview, there are different ways in which you can figure out, is this person open for diversity or not?
Mm-hmm. A lot of food for thought, Abiola. Thank you for that. But I want to close today with that one thing that you mentioned around you're a fan of music. So let's talk about that for a minute. So what are you a fan about? Or what kind of music?
Okay. It's actually a very broad... I love African jazz, Afrobeat. I like jazz in general. I am a huge fan of music from the 80s and the 90s, the typical Soul Train thing. So it's a huge thing. And I just discovered my love for the Beatles only a couple of weeks ago. I never actually really listened to them. I was like, it's just nice, happy-go-lucky. And then there was this documentary on Netflix And I just realized, my God, there are these people sitting down, just strumming away, and then Let It Be comes out, right? And you think about the genius of it, and I thought to myself, oh, wow, so this is why I like music. I play the piano, not as good as I would love to, and I don't practice as often as I should, but I've been playing since I was 9 years old, and I play mostly classical music. And so I have a very, very, very broad range. If I listen to music, it helps me relax. It helps me concentrate, believe it or not. And if I'm feeling down, I listen to music. If I'm feeling really happy, I listen to music. A lot of it also has to do with my Nigerian background. We dance for everything. There's music for everything. There's a song for everything. My second name, my name is Ashake, which is actually a poem. Many children in my culture, in Yoruba, they have this name that is actually a story. And my grandmother, I remember, would always come. Every time we saw her, she would sing this poem and dance. So any occasion, you dance. Any occasion. Somebody is born, you dance. Somebody comes home from university, you dance. Somebody graduates, you dance. Somebody passes an exam, you dance. And so from there came this love of music, this love of dance, and it has developed with me throughout. I have absolutely no one type or genre of music where I would say that is the only type I listen to. I'm very, very open, and anything that just moves me, for me, is good music.
Yeah. And I love to watch you while you're telling that story, because you almost want to jump out of your chair. Oh, this is so cool. You amaze me. You continue to amaze me, Abiola.
Oh, Karsten.
What is the one thing I didn't ask you yet?
Oh, gosh, I was hoping you would never ask me that question. Okay, let's see. Maybe, let me think. What could I have? Maybe one question would be, what was instrumental in getting me to where I am now?
That's a great question. So, Abiola, what was instrumental to getting you where you are right now?
Support from my loved ones, support from my parents, support from my husband. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to do that PhD. He just took over everything in the house so that I could do it. Right? I'm not sure how many people can get very far without some sort of support from other people, which again is something, and that's another question that you haven't asked, what my drive is in terms of what I do right now. And because I got that support, I would hope that I can give other people that support too. My students, especially, as I put a lot of emphasis, a lot of value. You know, as professors, we are always expected to do research. I'm in the University of Applied Sciences now, so there's more teaching, but I put both on the same level. I find that it is of great. I love teaching. I enjoy it, and it always gives me a lot of satisfaction to watch the students learn, to see their faces when they've learned something new, to see them when they self-reflect, and see this learning process going through, and them sitting down and going, oh yeah, that is true, right? And I see that as my way of supporting their success. And support.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Abiola, I could continue for a couple of hours, but I think let's wrap it up here and maybe continue in a second episode. Thank you so much for taking us on a journey through your life and kind of the different development, the shifts, was very, very inspirational. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Karsten. It was a pleasure.
Abiola, all the best.
Thank you. You too.
And what have you learned, Karsten?
What a story. I would say this is pretty fascinating, pretty amazing, and also inspiring. That inner strength, the humor, this energy that is just there when you talk to Abiola, and when she describes her changes, and it all sounds easy. It all sounds effortless, and I'm sure it wasn't, but there's this inner strength in her that I admire, and I find really great. What do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your reflections when you listen to Abiola's life story and her career or her development from Africa to Europe, and from engineering into business, into academia? Looking forward to your thoughts. Write me an email at karsten.drath@leadershipchoices.com. Looking forward to your thoughts. And thanks for listening, and all the best to you. Stay healthy, and hear you next time at Leaders Talk. Bye-bye.
This was an episode of Leaders Talk, the interview podcast portraying leaders who are committed to better leadership, better organizations, and a better world, powered by Leadership Choices. If you want to give us feedback, please send an email to leaderstalk@leadership-choices.com. Thank you for listening.